Hi, I'm Brian Dunn, and welcome to the most important podcast ever. What makes it so important? It's not about me, it's about you. This podcast is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, the moments of resilience, the lessons learned, and the small acts that make a big difference. From retail floors to boardrooms, we'll share the untold stories that shape lives and careers. This week, our guest is Jimmy Williams, and I am so excited to have my friend Jimmy Williams on the show today. Jimmy is the author of Getting Through the Worst Possible Thing, and it is a book that will, in my view, change your perspective on life. And it is powerful. I've read it twice, and I'm so excited to have the man himself here to talk about it. So, with that, I'd love to bring Jimmy in and have him introduce himself.
All
Let's get
right,
started.
Brian. Hey, I am. Thank you for the intro and talking about my book. And man, I am. I'm so excited for you and for your audience to be able to see you bringing people together like this and hearing stories about how people do amazing things. And obviously, through the cover of my book, I am kind of an ordinary person that went through something extraordinary, and I'm really excited to be here to talk to you a little bit about it and hopefully help somebody get through their worst possible thing.
That's awesome. And there's so much there to talk about. Maybe you could just start with telling a little bit how we connected, how we met each other.
Well, let's see. Back in the late '90s, I was a retail dog. I grew up working for a company called The Wiz, which any Seinfeld fans out there, nobody beats The Wiz guy. That's probably the most famous thing that you could say about the company. Looking back now, hindsight's always 2020. But I grew
Now
up.
it's the was now.
Yes, you made that clear when you were all recruiting me to come to Best Buy. Yeah, so the late '90s, I knew the Yankees were coming to town, which I'm a New Yorker, a Long Island kid, and New York Yankees are my favorite baseball team. And I knew Best Buy was coming, and I spent 11 years in the consumer electronics space, and I knew Best Buy was going to put a hurt on our model. Best Buy had kind of broken the commission sales floor, skinny tie, retail consumer electronics business. And I knew it was probably going to be time to look at an opportunity. I had a couple of friends who were working up in what I guess was Region 9, if I remember right, in Boston, Mike Esposito being one of them. And Espo and I worked together unloading trucks in the early years of the Wiz together. And he said, "Oh, you got to come work for Best Buy. You got to meet these guys." And I was lucky enough to get hired with the company. I did all my training up in Boston with Sean McGee was my training store manager in the Danvers store, and that's when I got to meet you and Sean Score and a slew of other great leaders. And I honestly I felt like I found my home, and yeah, the rest is history. I mean, you helped guide me through my career, Brian, in so many ways. Starting out as a store manager, working for Tim McGeehan, who's obviously a mutual friend and someone that also guided me through my career at Best Buy. And you guys moved me all over the country. And man, I just have nothing but wonderful things, memories of Best Buy. In fact, the book and the coloring is an homage to Best Buy.
It's
It's in
cool.
the yellow and blue very specifically because of not only all of the leaders that had an impact on me in my life, but how kind literally thousands and thousands of people were to us when we were going through the battle. So that's a little bit about the history you and I have.
You're on my Mount Rushmore of store managers. I just loved the work you did. I also remember our first conversation. Then I'll get us into the important stuff. I grew up in New York. I lived there till I was 13. I lived in there. I was there in '69 when the Jets and the Mets and the Knicks won.
Yeah.
Um, I loved the Yankees. I didn't love any of those teams except the Knicks. I loved the Yankees. And that was the one era where they were terrible.
Yes.
I still wear, I have a Yankee warm-up jacket. I wear all over the place, and people are like, front runner, front runner. I'm like, no, baby, I earn this. I earn this. Uh, so I would love it if you can tell us about what inspired you to write this book. And more importantly, maybe even, how did you know it was time to tell the story?
Wow. Well, I think the easy answer to that is Kyle, my son, who was diagnosed at cancer at 5 years old. And the book actually started getting written through the course of his treatments. At the time, there was a relatively new blog or site where you could go called Caring Bridge, where you could go and update people about loved ones, their health situation, and so on. And Leslie and I both started blogging on that site very early after his diagnosis at Children's Hospital in Minneapolis. And as I was writing it, people were commenting about, "My God, Jim, you have to write a book. You write so beautifully," and so on and so forth. And you know, that was obviously not my intention, not what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
But when I had a bit of a gift of time in late 2023, going into 2024, and I decided what would be the 20th birthday for Kyle, that I was going to dust off that blog, which ended up having like 60,000 words in it.
Yeah.
The average book has somewhere between 45 and 50,000 words. So I knew I had the makings of something there, but I felt like it was really important, Brian, for me to read that and go through that journey again, because it put me right back to all of those moments, obviously. And I really felt like, just based upon the time I was in my life and what I knew the book could do for others, because through that journey with Kyle, both Leslie and I became confidants, support networks for other parents who had lost children and had gone through traumatic experiences like that. So, yeah, man, I just dusted that thing off and started to write the manuscript and put context against it. And all of a sudden I turned around and I had, I don't know, 85,000 words worth of content, and said, okay, now what do I do? I never wrote a book before. So I literally just figured it out as I went.
Yeah. I read all your blogs and Leslie's blog entries as you were going through this unimaginable journey. Then, when I read the book for the first time, you were kind enough to send me an early one to look at,
Yeah, yeah.
and I read it, and all of a sudden, I was just back there, and it was
Mhm.
a very emotional experience. Uh, Cancer's touched my life, as you know, and not in the way it's touched yours, for sure. I'm not comparing the two journeys, but my wife had a long battle with cancer. And when cancer moves in, it's it's brutal, from diagnosis to grief. You go through all these things, but
Yeah.
you also find a community that pops up, don't you?
Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And when we went from Children's Hospital in Minneapolis, which is where Kyle was diagnosed, and as a as a retail person and someone that grew up in a very process people oriented environment, when his diagnosis came through, as initially we thought it was leukemia, but it ended up being a disease called neuroblastoma, which the outcomes for children, especially children who are older than 5, are the prognosis is very poor. So I went into problem solving mode, which, when you work and grow up in the retailing world like we did, you're always solving some semblance of a problem, a customer problem, an employee problem, just a problem in general that happens when you're dealing with literally thousands and thousands of people every day. And when I started to attack this particular problem with the most important person in our lives, our 5-year-old son, it became clear to me that, we had to move. So
Yeah.
to Sloan Kettering in New York City for his care. And, those are the things that, like, when these kind of things happen to you, the community, not only of your friends and colleagues and people that love and care for you, they start showing up, but you become part of kind of like this subculture, which, to your point, is a different kind of community. And when we first showed up on the 9th floor of Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, which is the pediatric floor there, it took my breath away. to see how many children were afflicted with cancer that I knew very little about, other than skipping past the St. Jude television channels because it's so hard to look at.
Right.
And that's all I really knew about pediatric cancer until it knocked on my door, as you said.
And Sloan Kettering, that's the gold standard. I mean,
When it
that
comes to
is,
when it comes to neuroblastoma treatments, there's a couple of centers around the world and around the country specifically that are great at it. They're one of them. Children's Hospital in Philadelphia is another one of them. Of course, Texas Children's is also Dana-Farber. There's a handful of them, but if you want to be seen by the institution and the doctors that see the most cases of neuroblastoma globally, because there's only 600 or 700 of these cases a year, so this is incredibly, incredibly rare.
I didn't realize that.
Oh
6 or
yeah,
700. Wow.
a year. So it is pediatric cancer, thankfully, Brian, is super rare, but it is the #1 disease killer of children. So, that's what, as we go through this discussion, there's so many gifts that have come from this horrific experience. And one of them was to not only become a part of that pediatric cancer community, but really start to stand up as an advocate for children with pediatric cancer and raising money and using my network to do so. I mean, you have to make lemonade out of lemons. And I mean, I certainly don't need to tell you, like you said, you read the blog, you lived it in a way side by side with us over those 18 months. But yeah, it's a subculture that you don't want to be a part of, but once you're a part of it, you're never not.
Right. And I know you've been involved with boards and helping work through all that, because it's so important to those of us that have experience with the various cancers that we give and become part of those communities.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I don't know if there's a worse thing that you can hear that a loved one has cancer. Like
It's the worst possible thing.
It is. It is the word. And I appreciate what you said at the outset, comparing an adult to a child. There's lots of cancers that come as a complete and utter shock. You haven't done the things behaviorally that would lead to an outcome like that. Obviously, this is a genetic situation. This is when a neuron, fired when it shouldn't have, and neuroblasts are how the body kind of grows over time when you're developing. And all it is unchecked neuroblast formation, which create the tumors. And it's called the silent killer for children because you can't really see it manifesting itself. There's no lump in the breast, right? There's no, hey, a lot of different things with my body don't seem to be working right. It's like lights on 1 minute, lights off the next. And that's how he was diagnosed. It was such a shock. Because he just 48 hours before his diagnosis, he was out playing hockey, skating, on the ice, full bore, like nothing was wrong.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. As you went through the process of writing, was it healing? Was it painful? Was it all of the above?
I as I mentioned, what's so interesting is I had already written this book, right? I just hadn't put perspective around it, because when you're in the shock, because when someone's diagnosed with cancer, the first thing is that you're shocked. And there's an old adage about Sarah, and when Sarah comes to visit, you're shocked, you're angry, you're resentful, but then you have to get to a place where you accept the cards you're playing. And it's when you get to acceptance that you can start to react and you get out of those emotional kind of mindset frames that you're in. And that acceptance leads to hope. And, for us, and when I was writing the blog, it was literally going through all 5 elements of that model pretty much every single day, because Kyle was never cleared of disease. So I actually got a chance to write the book, if you will, twice. I got to write it when I was living it, and then I got to write it with a decade of hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
And what his experience and his teachings and his legacy brought me, and what it's brought me through is, it's again, it's the worst gift I've ever gotten, obviously.
Right.
I firmly believe that, if God brings you to it, he'll bring you through it. And, God brought us to this. And, I needed to figure out a way. So again, I had the gift of writing the book twice.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough.
And I had the gift of reading it twice. And this really,
Yeah.
and the first time, as I said, it was more emotion, and all of a sudden, I was back there on the periphery, watching you and Leslie go through this. And then when I read it the second time, I have all these sticky notes. There's a lot of wisdom in here, Jimmy, and there's a lot of things. One of the things that I was really kind of overwhelmed with the second time reading was the resilience of the faith you all had. And by faith, I mean that the next scan was going to be better. The next treatment was going to be better. And it's like you're going across a river on a vine and you got to grab that next vine, and you have to keep hope alive, don't you?
It's an excellent metaphor for the experience. I mean, it really is, because if you drop off that vine, there is no floor,
There's
there
no
is no
net.
like soft landing.
Yep.
And I think when we were going through this, one of the things that Kyle taught me, and I'm not going to say that I didn't live my life with some elements of this mindset, but he was able to package it all together as a 5 and 6 year old boy. And, Kyle was tremendously faithful, more faithful than me, frankly. And I'm a Roman Catholic boy, went to church, went to Sunday school, did the whole thing, went to a private Catholic high school. Like, that's how I was raised. Leslie's a Lutheran, which is kind of like Roman Catholic light. Like, you can wear shorts to church, you know.
But don't tell Leslie that.
No, she loves that about, and now we're in a non-denominational church where it's like, all bets are off. It's really more about the lessons of Christ versus the
Right. Right.
process of going to church. But
Mhm.
anyway, Kyle was like an incredibly faithful little boy. And, it's in the book before his diagnosis that Leslie was tucking him in one night. And, the faith element that you just called out really started then, but we didn't know, because Jesus through him was warning us that, because Kyle told Leslie, I'm never going to get any bigger than this. And this was before he was even 5 years old. And, Leslie's like, that's impossible. Your father's 6'4", 300 pounds, like that. Like that's not going to happen. Yes, I'm small, but you're likely going to get his genes. You're already big. I mean, you're big for your age. He's like, nope, Jesus told me. And, you don't realize what that is until obviously then he gets diagnosed with cancer. And then, 18 months later, he's gone. So he never really did get any bigger, but he knew where he was going, right? So that belief you talk about, believing that you can get to that next kind of vine, was what because that's how he got up every single day. Like, he didn't get up saying, woe is me. He got up with the mind of a 5-year-old and the mentality of it, which I think as adults, we can all learn from. I've certainly tried to learn from it. I don't apply it every day like I wish I would, but I learned from it. And I watched this faith-driven belief manifest itself in a 5 and 6 year old boy. So when he's setting the standard for you as the parent, I mean, what choice do you have but to model that? Like, because
right.
you're literally having, your 5 and 6 year old son lead you through this, and telling me multiple times, it's going to be okay, Dad. It's going to be okay. Jesus told me it's going to be okay. And it's these powerful snippets that, and it really taught me what empathy means. And, how, we were talking, the other day, it's to me, empathy is something you do with people. Sympathy is it's something you do for people. And Kyle was the living embodiment of empathy. We would be so upset when he would do a horrific treatment, and he would be consoling us, his caregivers, like, because they were all heartbroken. They loved him. They thought he was going to be, his doctor's going to be, this is going to be one of the kids that make it. And when he didn't, there's obvious, challenges that come from that for everybody, not just his parents, all the caregivers, the people that really cared for him and loved him at Sloan at University of Minnesota's Children's in University of Minnesota Hospital, Children's Hospital, Children's Hospital Philadelphia. I mean, he was at 4 different institutions, so he had family members kind of everywhere, and he made such a mark. I mean, there's no other way to put it.
100%. And a couple of things I just want to say. The reason why he said Jesus talked to him is because I believe he did.
Oh, no doubt.
And I believe that boy is an angel. And even today, it's very emotional sitting where I am because it was amazing.
Well, you held him in your arms, right, when he was sick, and he was at Best Buy. So there's
Yep. Dressed as an elf.
Yeah.
An angel dressed as an elf. It was
as
awesome.
an elf, and then he went upstairs on the second floor or third floor, and went on to play some drum set that the Foo Fighters left or something. And he's just, and this is he's in the middle of he's in the middle of the worst possible thing, and
Exactly.
finding ways to be, have belief, have empathy for others, which causes you to learn the power of that and what it really means. Resilience, right? It's like, never quitting, never, even till the last minute. He took his last breath, he was teaching me how to get through this, and very powerful lessons.
When you write and when people read this book, and please read this book because it's important. When you write about Kyle's last breath, and we don't have to get into it, it really moved me. Every time I look at that passage, Jimmy, it moves me. It's beautifully written, and it's clear it's from your heart, and with a wanting to share with others through getting through the worst possible thing. And when you hit rock bottom like that, what you've done here, I think, is really powerful. I'm curious, you talk about empathy in these things, and you and I talked a little bit last time we spoke about empathy versus sympathy.
Mhm.
I'm not a huge sympathy guy. I'm a big empathy guy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you said empathy is a verb, and I love that.
Hmm.
Um, are there lessons you carry? And I know the answer is, of course, yes, from Kyle every day. And could you share a couple of them with us?
Yeah. Back when he was first diagnosed, I had become kind of a fan of a leadership thinkers named Simon Sinek, and he came up with the whole start with why. And what the why really means to me is, like, what's your purpose? Like, why are you really here? What ripple would happen in the universe if you were not here? And of course, many businesses have taken that into the business context, right? And set a purpose as an organization everybody can rally behind, put a vision under it, a mission, so on and so forth. So I think when I saw Kyle modeling these behaviors that were getting us through his cancer treatments, I started to frame up my personal purpose in life. Like, what am I going to do from this? What am I going to do because of this? And in some ways, I think in most ways, it's made me a better person. There are certain things that, I don't have a lot of patience for ridiculousness. I think it gave me perspective on, like, don't sweat the small stuff kind of stuff here, because it really is small. Like, when you go through really tough stuff, and sometimes that can come across as, I don't know, maybe a little judgmental, and I hate that. I try to get in front of it as best I can, but I guess the point is Kyle kind of taught me these lessons of mindset. I really started to understand what the power of your purpose and your why is together. And then I started to frame up, like, how do I have to put myself in the right mindset every day? And some days without any sleep, some days. And that's what was getting me through. And that's what you see kind of show up. So he started to teach me this mindset framework during his diagnosis, through his death. And then I carried that mindset through, to so many examples of where I've applied it. And I call it the Bergs, Bergs, because the most dangerous part of an iceberg is not what you see, it's what's underneath the waterline. And most of us never release what's underneath the waterline. We keep that hidden. Those are doubt. Those are, it's all those, it's all the stinking thinking that we put underneath that we don't really want anybody to see. And I believe that you have to try to bring those things out by having a certain mindset. And, that Bergs stands for something. It's belief, empathy, resiliency, gratitude, and service of something larger than yourself. And, I have to tell this story about Kyle. Like, you would give him the simplest of things, and it was like you gave him the biggest of things. Like, the Best Buy team brought him the 5,000-piece Death Star. And when he was in hospice care, he gave it to his then best friend, Ben. Like, he knew he wasn't going to be there to play with it anymore. And he asked me first because I built it with him. He's like, Dad, is it okay if I give this to Ben? So, and Ben still has it. Ben's 21.
That's awesome. That's awesome,
so,
man.
you start thinking about, what really matters. And when he got that 5,000-piece Death Star that he built and a Lego hard candy, he would react with the same gratitude and appreciation, regardless of the scope. And it taught me so much about, man, these little things, these little gifts, they really, really matter. And the last thing I'll share about him, that in this Bergs mindset framework that he taught me, is we were watching him when we were at Children's, and this was towards the end. So he had become a professional at pediatric cancer care. Like, he knew how the game was played. He knew what he was there for. He knew what he was going to get. And, he would disappear. We would drop him off and he would disappear back with the nurses. And we'd be like, where is he? And I think I went off to work and Leslie was there with him. And the nurses came out and said, I really think you should know what he's doing back there. And Leslie's like, well, what do you mean? What is he doing? What? He's getting treated. No. He's not even he's not even in his room yet. He's helping the other kids get through what they're about to go through. Like, he's telling them about how their port works. He's telling them that initially it hurts, but they give you this EMLA cream to, like, he knew. And I thought about the power of service of something larger.
Yeah.
And these kids are scared to death, right? They're experiencing something for the first, maybe second time. And I watched him do that when he's going through such a painful experience. And he was in such pain because the disease had, like, racked his body by this point. He had a hard time walking, his hips. The tumors were really kind of all over. So I guess my point is like, when I think about what Kyle taught me and how I carry that framework every day, the power of purpose and the power of this mindset. And I know this, again, everybody goes through difficult things. And, the reason I wrote the book and gave it the title I gave it is because the worst thing is in the eye of the beholder. Like, if you lose your job, that could be the worst thing.
Right.
Your son or daughter has an addiction. That's the worst thing. It doesn't have to be on the level of losing a child to cancer. We all have our worst things. And like I said, I'm hopeful that as people read the book, and many have, and they've reached out to me saying, this gave me perspective. I was thinking about this in the completely wrong way. And that's why I wrote it, Brian, and that's what Kyle gives me and what I carry, what he's given me, what I carry every day.
And I love the idea, the notion, and I think it's one of the keys to happy and fulfilled living is caring about something one level up, I call it, more than yourself.
Yeah.
It can be your community, it can be your family, it can be your faith, but something. And Kyle was manifesting that going through the worst possible thing. Very impressive.
Yeah.
I want to keep you for a few more minutes if I can, because I know that I have two more questions for you. First one, will you tell us about the miracle of summer, please?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I think, I mentioned earlier, I think, if God brings you to it, he'll bring you through it. He won't give you anything you can't handle. And, so, so, when Kyle passed away, Leslie and I were grieving not only him, but being parents, because he was our only child. So Leslie had miscarried multiple times, and he was a miracle. Leslie had really bad endometriosis. And for the ladies watching, and even some of their husbands or significant others know, that's a very debilitating um, disease. And it also really adversely impacts pregnancies. So she had a number of miscarriages. So to say that Kyle was a miracle is the God's honest truth. He was a miracle. When we conceived him and Leslie ended up getting the endometriosis taken care of, the doctor said, "I cannot believe that you conceived the child with the level of disease that you were managing," which is in itself unbelievable. So we, fast forward, Kyle gets diagnosed, he passes away. So we're just such in a complete state of grief and sadness, and how are we going to live life? And at the time, Best Buy shipped me from the corporate office. We needed to get out of Minnesota, so we moved to Virginia, and we're living in Virginia. And I'm out to dinner with Guy Vance, and I know you know Guy. And Guy adopted children from Russia. And I'm out at McCormick and Schmick's with him in Reston. I remember it like it was yesterday, because I'm asking him, like, what is it going to take for me, and how quickly can I get another child? Because I'm trying to solve the problem, like most of us men try to do. Even though this is not an easily solvable problem, I'm like, well, I lost my son to cancer. I'm going to change somebody else's life. I'm going to go and adopt children because we couldn't have any more of our own. So he's walking me through the whole thing, what him and his wife went through, and so on and so forth. And then my phone rings, and it's Leslie. She goes, "You won't believe this. Jen and Greg from Chicago," because we lived there too with Best Buy, "just called us. They have a cousin who's going to give birth in like 8 weeks, and they're wondering if we're still interested in adopting." I'm like, "You have to be fucking kidding me. Excuse my French. You have to be kidding me." So I say to Guy, I said, "Hey man, I'm going to get the check, but I got to get home." He's like, "Is everything okay?" I said, "Yeah, we just had a call that there may be a baby for us to adopt." So long story short, I rush home. We commit to flying to Chicago the next day from Virginia. We fly out there. We meet the mom, the birth mom, and her mom. Her mom and dad wanted her to keep Summer, who hadn't been born yet, obviously. It was 8 weeks out. She had thought she took care of the pregnancy with the Plan B abortion pill. That's why she didn't even think, or she didn't believe she was pregnant, because she thought she took care of it. Obviously, she didn't. So we fly out there for the most important job interview ever. Like, I've had some good job interviews in my career, and I've had some bad ones. This one was one I didn't want to over talk. Like, I wanted to be present. I wanted to hear what Brittany, who's a birth mom, wanted to solve, and how we could help her solve it. That's the lens I went into it
Of course.
with.
Yeah.
And so we end up going to a place where we took Kyle for breakfast almost every weekend in Libertyville, called Wildberry. They had the best mix of strawberry and orange juice in the planet. He loved it. That's where they asked to go. We didn't ask to go there, they did. So we get there, and it was about a 2.5, 3 hour conversation. And they said, "Okay, we're going to think about it, and we'll call you tomorrow." We were like, "What?" It's like, I'm not buying a car here, like,
Right.
I
Right.
don't, but
Right.
I appreciated where they were coming from, and Leslie and I both did. And, so we went back to the hotel, and we're just staring at each other going, like, is this really happening? Can we make this happen? So the next day they call us and said, "Hey, we want to place the baby with you." And for those in your audience and those that watch this, however it gets shared, uh, anyone that's gone through adoption, it could be a very painstaking process, a very difficult one. So we did the entire thing in what amounted to 8 weeks. I had to get attorneys on. This is where kind of the arranger in me and the activator is
Yeah.
back to the good old strength finder days of Gallup.
Yep.
I
Yep.
just like, okay, how am I going to get this done? Because this baby's coming in February. What's even more eerie about the whole story of Summer, and I'm so glad you brought her up, because she is an amazing child. Not a child, she's a young lady now. She's 13. But what was amazing, not that she survived the Plan B abortion pill, not that she survived, the fact that she had no prenatal care. It's like, okay, now how am I going to get all of this done? And in the back of my head, I'm like, we are messed up people. Like, we just went through the worst possible thing. How are we going to pass like the home study? I'm thinking of all of these things and I'm scared to death about all of these things. So, this Summer was conceived literally the same week Kyle passed. So she's a February 17th born. Kyle passed on May 3rd. So you can do the quick 9-month math and you're right in the neighborhood. So,
Right.
when and so, and this girl, Summer, and up until the minute she was born, Brian, we weren't quite sure if we were going to walk out of that hospital with that baby because Brittany's parents, mom and dad, who are wonderful people, we've stayed in touch with them. They are part of our family and we're part of their family. So anybody that has questions about adoption, they can ping you on your site. You could shoot them over to me, whatever. Open adoption is the way to go. If you can do that and you can stay in touch with, especially in our situation, it has been so healthy for all of us as a family because now we are a family. Um, but we went through the whole thing. And I remember when the lady from Catholic Charities came to do the home study, I knew that we were a mess. And I actually told her, I said, we're a mess. She's like, I know. She goes, but I'm going to give you this baby because it's meant to be. It's supposed to happen. And I was like, so, and she shouldn't have. We were not prepared. We were not prepared for it. But meaning just in the ways that you typically prepare to be parents, we weren't ready. But God, Kyle just used that to say, hey, you took me from these people.
Yep.
Jesus, you have to give them this girl because no two people will love this child more than them. That I know because I lived it myself.
There are no coincidences along those levels, and that was intended to be.
It was.
Jimmy, there's so much more I want to talk to you about. I'm simply going to have another episode with you because
I hope you do.
I want to talk about where you're going with getting through the worst possible thing. I think there are so many lessons here. And as a father, I think one of the most important pair of attributes a father can have is strength and the ability to be vulnerability. And those two things together, seemingly paradoxical, are actually what I believe unlocks the magic of fatherhood. And I think you are a living, breathing example of that. I do. And I'm going to get a link to your book. I hope everybody will pick it up and read it twice because the first time through, it's very raw. The second time through, you see the brilliance of the wisdom and the lessons that Kyle, Jimmy, and Leslie and those around them are imparting. And I think you've shared it beautifully, brother. And you know what else I love? You choose hope, and hope is a choice. And
Mm.
I'm just, if you don't mind my saying, I'm so proud to know you and be
Oh,
your buddy. And I just love you and your family. And I really want to do another episode on where you're going with this.
yeah, I'd be happy to, Brian. And if the book does get a little heavy, I would suggest two things. One, have Kleenex handy. Two, if you go to my social media, which I sent you the links to, that's where I kind of pull out the lessons and I share them on all my social media channels. So if the book gets a little heavy, those are the lessons I want to impart on people. I hope a lot of people read the book, but it was never about selling books.
Yeah, no, I think it's about the lessons and the
Yeah.
message. And when I say heavy, I mean it's emotional.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
going to connect with you. And I think that's a positive.
Agreed.
So we're going to, we'll attach a link to where you can get Jimmy's book. And we're going to attach how you can reach Jimmy on his social media. And we're going to get Jimmy scheduled again soon. So with that, brother, I thank you so much for your time. And I appreciate you all so much. Best to Leslie, okay?
Yeah. Love you, Brian. Thank you. Best of luck with the podcast.
Thank
Pleasure
you
to be a
so
part of it.
much.
All right.
And with that, uh, that's it for this episode of the most important podcast ever. Big thanks to Jimmy Williams for sharing his story. And a big thanks to you for listening or watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who might find it meaningful. And I think a lot of people might find this conversation meaningful. You can watch and listen on our YouTube channel and follow us on social media, and we'll have links to all that with this posting. Thank you all so much. Have a great week.